If you have any questions during this event, you're good to just throw them in the chat right away, and we'll kind of have a back and forth dialogue there. But yeah, so once again, we have Dr. Brad Klontz. He is a founder of the Financial Psychology Institute and an associate professor of practice in financial psychology at Creighton University Hyder College of Business. He is a managing principal of your mental wealth advisors, a fellow of the American Psychology Association, and a former president of the Hawaii Psychological Association. He has partnered with organizations including JP Morgan Chase and HR Block in efforts to help raise public awareness around issues related to financial health and financial psychology. So that's a little bit about our speaker today, and I'll go ahead and let him take the floor.
Hi, thanks for having me. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. So good to see those nods. So people ask me what I do for a living, and I always struggle, to be honest, because I do about 10 different things, and I don't want to narrow it down to 9 because I'll get bored. I think 10 is the thing that keeps me excited. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about my history, and then I can talk about what it is I do. So I got a doctorate in clinical psychology. And I should back up before that and say that I grew up in a working class family. My parents split when I was 2. We didn't have much money. And I think even as a kid, I was sort of obsessed with the question. So, you know, I've got branches of my family that have been in the United States since the Mayflower. And, you know, why don't we own a building with our name on it? You know, this is sort of the question I had as a kid. It's like, why are we in trailer parks? Like, what the hell's going on here? Because I got a family that's hardworking, that are really great people, that are very smart. And so I'm like, what's going on? And so I think as a kid, I was definitely attracted to trying to figure out that question. So because again, smart, hardworking. So some people end up in a financial situation than others, right? So that was just something I was really curious about. I remember as a kid hanging out with some of my friends and being at dinner at their house, and I noticed that they were like middle class and upper middle class. And I remember even in middle school, sort of like grilling the parents, you know, like, hey, so what do you do for a living? You know, I'm just really sort of fascinated and curious about that. So that's the background. So anyway, I became a clinical psychologist. And the reason I did that is, well, first of all, I didn't really like calculus. So that was one of the reasons I went into psychology. And I was interested in the psychology classes. And I was like, okay, so I think I want to be a therapist. And so then what I did is I went and I researched which therapists make the most money. Because if you're going to be doing therapy, you might as well get paid more than doing therapy and not getting paid, right? So I was looking at it from that business perspective. And I went and I got a doctorate in clinical psychology. I had to borrow $100,000 to get it. I don't know if anyone else has any student loans. Yeah, I owed $100,000. It wasn't very pleasant. And when I got out of school, my supervisor at the time, I saw him make $100,000 day trading. And you know, how many day traders don't raise your hand? It's okay. But I was like, what a brilliant way for me to get out of debt, right? This only makes sense. This is what I should do. It's only logical. And so I sold everything I had of value. And just to give you a sense of what I was doing, I had a truck. That was the thing that I had that was worth the most money. I bought a $500 car. I had no furniture in my house. I had lawn chairs, etc. I was very serious about this. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to make 100,000 and get out of debt. And the rest is history. I became a multimillionaire day trading. No, actually I didn't. I lost all my money, which is what typically happens. And if you've seen any research on day trading, it's pretty clear. The statistics are pretty clear. Now, people don't believe it right now. There's like a whole group of people who are day trading, and maybe you're doing it on the side because it's a bull market, right? So, it just makes sense. If you're buying and selling things in a market that's doing this, you're going to have, odds are you're going to have some decent returns. And so that's what happened to me. I had a fabulous run. And then the tech bubble burst. So the .com bubble, I was doing it for about 4 months, and then the .com bubble just blew up. And And that was pretty rough, right? So I told you I didn't come from much. I had this debt, and here I was, I did this stupid thing, with my money. And so that was sort of the question I had. I said, why would a reasonably intelligent person do something so stupid when it came to his money? So that was the question I asked myself. And being trained as a psychologist, we do things called lit reviews, and you probably have done some of this in your work as a student. So I went into the psychology literature, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to find out the psychology of money and wealth and all that, because I'm going to change my behaviors around money. I'm going to transform my life. I'm going to study what rich people do, and I'm going to just adopt those mindsets and habits. And so I literally went into the field of psychology doing a lit review for this, and I couldn't find anything at all. Behavioral finance was still kind of new at that point, and the studies that existed, were pretty general studies around, abstract things like overconfidence and that kind of thing, but nothing really practical for me as a human being around, why would my thinking be like this? How do I explain my family's legacy around money? What the heck's going on? And so what I did is I decided, I sort of joke, within a matter of a couple of weeks, I became the world's leading expert in financial psychology. And the reason that's true is because psychologists have totally ignored the topic of money. And so the entire field of psychology for 100 years totally ignored the topic of money, which is pretty strange, because the American Psychological Association has been doing something called the Stress in America survey every year. And the number one source of stress in the lives of Americans, which, by the way, the richest country in the world throughout human history, the number one source of stress is money. So it's anywhere from 70 to 80% of Americans say that money is the number one source of stress in their lives, above children, above work, above health, above everything else. And so I just find it kind of ironic that the field of psychology then doesn't do anything about money, doesn't, research it or anything like that. So I became interested trying to figure out my own psychology around money. I went home, I interviewed my mother, I interviewed my father, and I found all these family stories. Now, what I did is I actually had a tape recorder, and I stuck it in front of my mom, and I started to interview her, and asking her questions about money. And my poor mother had been through this several times in my training as a psychologist. And I'm like, why did you and dad divorce? What's going on? So I'd put my poor mother through this many times before. She's like, but this time the topic of money. And so I was really curious. Mom, what was it like for you growing up around money? I kind of knew that they were poor, but how did she feel about it? What was her psychology around money? And so I interviewed my mother, I interviewed my father, and I started to discover these crazy stories that I had never heard about. But all of a sudden, these stories, it started to make sense. Okay, so no wonder I did what I did. And one of the stories that was so profound for me was my grandfather. So on my mother's side, he was a young man, and he went to the bank one day, and all his money was gone. And it was the Great Depression, and the banks collapsed. You couldn't even get anyone to answer the phone. Did they have phones back then? Answer the door, show me my money. Nothing, all gone. Now, just imagine the trauma that like, if you just wake up tomorrow and your parents or you, like, all their money's gone. Like, oh my gosh, traumatic experience, right? And so now all of a sudden, my mom's anxiety about not having money started to make sense, and the sort of family legacy of poverty. Because what I found out is my grandfather never put $1 in the bank the rest of his life, which makes sense if you don't trust banks, right? But the federal government came in, started guaranteeing bank accounts, and that's when it became a bit dysfunctional. Massively dysfunctional. My grandfather left his money in a lockbox in the attic, and then ended up, passing away in a trailer park. Like, it just did not have any money. So all of a sudden, my mom's anxiety about money and her real conservative nature, like she'd put money in a bank, but only would do CDs, wouldn't do the stock market. All this started to make sense, right? And then, of course, I come along and I don't want to be poor like my family. So then I swing to the opposite and take this massive risk. And if I wasn't a psychologist, I think I would have probably ended up where my grandpa ended up. And I probably would have been like, and I see this right now on social media where, people got sucked into GameStop, and then they're like, they lost their money, and then they're like, I'm never going to invest again. And I'm pretty active on social media, and I'm like, that wasn't investing. Don't write off investing. They're two totally different things. You were speculating, which is fine. Take your Vegas money, go have fun, but that's not investing. And so anyway, thank goodness for me being a psychologist and essentially like trying to figure out my own psychology. So that's how I became interested in this stuff. And my father owned a treatment center at the time. And so he became a psychologist actually after I did, which is kind of cool. He was a high school teacher when I was growing up. And so what I did with him and a financial planner is about 2 years later, we developed a treatment program for people like me, people with dysfunctional behaviors around money, if you will. And so that's how I really got into it. I got in it from the psychology side. The first program we ran, the Wall Street Journal sent a reporter, and they sat in, they watched the program. And I'd never been interviewed by the press ever in my life. And so my very first press interview was front page Wall Street Journal business section. And the reporter said, "Hey, wow, this is really interesting stuff. Do you guys have a book?" And so then I said, "Yes." I said, "Yeah, we do. Well, we're working on one right now, And then I took my dad aside and I said, "Dad, we got to write a book, So that's how I got my first book idea. And that's my advice to you. If you ever get a Wall Street Journal reporter saying, "Wow, that's incredible. Do you have a book?" You always say, "Yes, yes, we're working on it right now." Because you've just been validated. Idea has just been validated. So that's how I got into it. And then with my background in psychology, I started to study it. And so that's how I got into it. And then this is the other part of my career is I do research. And so essentially my first research in this area was studying the effectiveness of that program. And so, we have people coming in, they're there for 6 days. We're using all this psychology stuff and a little bit of financial education. We had a financial planner we were working with at the time who did an hour and a half of the 7 days was financial education. And I'll talk a little bit about financial education when I get to one of my more recent studies. But we just went super hard at the psychology, right? And so what we found is the program increased people's financial health, decreased their anxiety, decreased their depression, et cetera. And I did some stuff in between that study and that study getting published. But the other big sort of flashpoint in my career was that study got published 1 month before the Great Recession. Does anyone remember that experience? Maybe you dealt with it. Maybe you saw parents deal with it, whatever. Everyone's losing their houses. The stock market's blowing up. It's another panic experience for people. And so my study came out 1 month before that. And I pitched it to the New York Times, and then all of a sudden it was front page New York Times. And so that led to another book deal and all this kind of fun stuff, and ultimately led to a 20 feature. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show, but they essentially sent cameras and they recorded 7 days worth of us working with people, et cetera. And so research was a big deal for me. And one of the things I started to research was something that we call money scripts. Have you guys heard about money scripts in your classes at all or anything? Okay, so essentially there had been one other study that was done, and it said that your attitudes about money have nothing to do with your financial outcomes. Okay. And when I saw that, I thought it was bullocks. I'm like, that's impossible. There's no way that's true. Being trained as a clinical psychologist, we have this whole branch of psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy, and essentially thousands of studies that show that, for example, your symptoms of depression or anxiety are directly linked to your beliefs and your self-talk. So I'm like, this is what we found, the one area where your beliefs have nothing to do with your life. It's impossible. So I looked at the studies, they were poorly designed. And so essentially I started to study that. So what we did during that treatment program is we had exercises that were designed to get people to uncover their beliefs around money. And this traces back to my grandfather's belief around money. You can't trust banks with your money. Well, if you have that belief, and especially if it's really anchored in trauma and emotion, you're probably not going to put money in the bank, right? I mean, this is pretty logical, right? Like your beliefs have a direct correlation with your behaviors, and your behaviors have a direct correlation, predictive. They predict your outcomes, right? So pretty simple. It's not that profound. The only thing that's profound is that, I did the first study showing this. And so what we did is we collected beliefs from people over the years. We looked at them, I looked at them. I'm like, rich people are evil. Rich people are greedy. Okay. Those are pretty close, So we narrowed it down to about 72 beliefs. And then we administered it to, at this point, it's been, 20,000 people probably. And, we see these really distinct patterns around beliefs and outcomes. And so I don't need to get into it right now. If this is something you're really interested in, you could take the test that we use in research, moneyscripts.com. I have it up there. That's my RIA, by the way. So yeah, so I started to research very heavily these beliefs around money, behaviors around money. I've written 2 textbooks at this point and 4 trade books, which are, you know, more sort of popular books. My most recent one just hit like #1 on Amazon for a while, which is pretty cool in the subcategory that it was in, retirement planning. So I've had a lot of fun doing that. I've had a ton of fun, you know, essentially putting this creative work into writing and publishing articles and doing research and all that kind of stuff. So research, I'm a research nut. I love it. The other thing I did is years ago, I was asked to teach at Kansas State University. So Kansas State University has a PhD in financial planning. And I was there, I think the second year that program was in existence, maybe it was the first year, teaching behavioral finance and financial psychology kind of classes. And so I started there, and then later I went over to Creighton University, where we have, you can get for a while there, you could get an MBA emphasis in financial psychology, which is pretty cool. We're in the middle of creating a master's degree in financial planning with an emphasis in financial psychology. So essentially I have 5 classes there that we've developed, and all the research I do, I just stick them in there, and I'm just really, really interested in expanding the body of knowledge around that, including identifying like problematic behaviors around money. So if you become a financial planner someday, you're going to see this all the time, where people financially enable other people. So they're giving them money that doesn't help. You know what I mean? And so I developed scales to measure that. We've done studies on it. We've done studies on the flip side on financial dependence, where you're dependent on money that you're not earning, and all the devastating psychological effects that has. So a lot of my research has been focused on that. And then most recently, my research has been focused on, can we change financial behaviors? And so I'll tell you about 2 studies we did. The first one was with, Capital One. This was incredible. So Capital One essentially funded a study, and in psychology, it's a randomized double-blind control study, which I just say to make you guys think I'm smart. But essentially what it is, it's how you study whether a medicine works. So essentially what you do is you get 2 groups of people, you give one person a placebo, and you give the other group the medicine. You don't tell them what the other groups are doing, et cetera. You measure change. And so the placebo, no offense, in this study was financial literacy. And so I got a PhD in financial planning. I didn't tell them what was happening in the other room. And I said, here's an hour and a half, get these people to save more money. And so it was a presentation on, you know, save cash equivalents, healthy financial ratios, you know, frankly, the stuff that you learn in class, and get people to save more. The other group, what I did is threw a bunch of psychology at them. So I talked about money scripts and the 4 different categories of money scripts, and, you know, 3 of which are bad for you, like hating rich people, not good, you know, if you want to become rich, you know, trying to keep up with the Joneses, not great. Thinking that money and stuff is going to make you happier, not great. You're going to spend more money. So I educated them on that stuff. And then I had them essentially get really specific around their goals, get really passionate about their goals. And the way I did that is essentially I did some guided imagery with them around their ideal, you know, retirement or whatever their goal was. And I had them create visual representations of those goals. I got them in touch with their values, et cetera. And then we tracked their savings as a percentage of gross income. So what we saw is in that financial education group, within 1 month, they had increased their savings by 22%, which is fabulous, right? Like education does work. In that psychology group, we saw a 73% increase in 1 month. So essentially they went from saving about 10% to about 17%. The other group went from 10 to 12%. So that was really exciting, right? Like getting people to, they didn't get any education on what they should do around savings. I just got them pumped up around why they wanted to save. And essentially from a psychological perspective, most of our decisions are made by our unconscious brain. Most of them are made by our emotional brain. And so this is why when we see something shiny, like we're sort of wired to go get it. Like delaying gratification, you know, all you guys are really weird, right? So you're into this like finance thing, financial planning thing. You're the oddballs. The average American is in terrible financial shape because we don't save future. And the reason we don't is because that's how we're wired. You know, we're wired to do that. I could talk a lot about that and the psychology around that, but essentially delaying gratification goes against 99.9% of our evolution and time as human beings. Keeping up with the Joneses, we're wired to do that. We've spent 99% of our existence in tribes of 150 people, And if you didn't care what everyone else thought about you, they would kill you or kick you out of the tribe, right? So it's really easy to be like, what's wrong with you? You care too much about what people think. Excuse my French, but that's bullshit. Everybody cares, right? And what happens is you just find a different group of people, and you're sort of rebelling against those other group of people, but you really, really care about what those people think about you. That's how we're wired, right? So to understand that is super important, because then you can override the impulse to keep up with the Joneses. If you keep lying to yourself about it, you're just going to find a different way to keep up with the Joneses. And so one of the ways to do that is to join a group of people who are like, fire folks, and try to out-save each other, right? And essentially deprive yourselves. So either way, it's a contest. We're always comparing ourselves. So just understanding that allows us to override it. So anyway, getting people really excited about their savings, we saw that huge increase. The other thing we did is Mutual of Omaha allowed us to tinker. They actually hired us to tinker with their 401k sign-up meeting. So they have a mandatory, companies have a mandatory, here's your 401k. And what they usually do is they throw up a bunch of charts of ETFs and show you, if you invest 10,000 now, in 30 years, you're gonna have this much money, that kind of thing. Great stuff, right? Well, what we did is we threw that out the window. We didn't do any of that. We gave people little sticker books and we gave them little animal pictures and a bunch of stickers. And we're like, here, show us your ideal retirement, right? So that's what we did. We did it in 3 different companies. We did it in a group of bankers, a group of gravel truck drivers, and a group of custom auto manufacturers. They made parts for custom autos. And we did the same thing. We looked at what percentage of their income were they saving. And we saw like a 40% increase in their 401k contributions after that experience. And by the way, we took out everyone who had never been to one of those meetings before. So all these people sat through a 401k sign-up meeting before. And we just saw a massive increase in their savings behavior just by getting super excited about what they're saving for and making it concrete, excuse me, making it visual, super, super powerful. So that's been a lot of fun, is finding ways to actually improve people's financial lives using financial psychology. The other thing I did is, as part of my PhD program that I was teaching in at Kansas State, my students are being trained in financial planning. So I thought, it'd be a good idea for me to like take the CFP courses. Like I figured it would, well, first of all, I'm interested in money, obviously. Secondly, I thought it'd be a cool way to, help me with research ideas and that kind of thing. So I went through the program at Kansas State, the master's certificate in financial planning. And then I had a colleague there who's like, hey, let's study for the CFP. And I was like, I don't want to study for the CFP. Have you guys heard about that exam? Are you kidding me? But she's like, come on, please, we'll do it together. So anyway, I was like, fine, I did it. So I became a CFP. And then I'd been consulting with financial planners for about 10 years. And I realized their business model was better than the psychology business model, which is a billable hour model. And so I was like, first of all, I was aware of that. And then my traditional psychology practice was, I had a contract with the state of Hawaii. It was being reduced. And so I was essentially either going to start a private practice. And then I had a friend who I had done some speeches for his clients, and he's like, hey, come work with me. And so essentially that's what happened. I started to work with an RIA, and then later I went out on my own. And so the other thing I do is I am an owner of a registered investment advisory company. We have, I think we're probably going to hit $500 million in assets. So I work with clients directly in that capacity too. So doing financial plans, et cetera. Now, obviously within my company, I have an expertise, a specialization. So I like to keep my hands, in there working with clients in more traditional aspects like client meetings and all that. But then of course I do, like family and couples and individual consulting around family business, succession, conflicts, that kind of thing, as well as couples in conflict around money, people worried about their kids, et cetera. So that's a lot of fun too. The other thing I do is a ton of media interviews. And the reason I do a ton of media interviews is because I'm the only financial psychologist you've met. And so, if somebody's Googling financial psychology, my name pops up, and there's always lots of opportunities in the press for people who are trying to figure out, stories around angles around the psychology of money and all that. So I do a lot of that stuff. And most recently, I've been putting all of my effort in social media on TikTok. Anyone on TikTok? Nobody? You guys are all boomers. Oh, you're on TikTok? Okay. And has anyone seen me on TikTok? No? I'm on TikTok, so check it out. I embarrass myself there quite frequently. I'm sort of like shameless around it because I don't really care. The only thing I worry about is every now and then I'll cross post on Instagram and I'll see the dean of my university like a video or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Whew. I'm always on the edge of getting fired. But I'm super passionate about it because I have this avatar in mind. And with this, when I'm done with this, I think I've hit a lot of the areas I wanted to talk about. I'll open for Q&A and learn from you and try to share anything I can with you that you think would be helpful. But I have this avatar in mind. And so I got onto TikTok because my nephews, first of all, I was on social media, right? So I've done spokesperson gigs for, you mentioned it, a few companies, and they're always like, oh yeah, post this, you got to do these 6 posts on your social media. So I kind of knew that the platform is important. And by the way, I'm just going to suggest this to you. Like, your personal brand is really important. And if you're not on social media, you should get on social media, and really try to create a brand there for yourself, because it's all going to be personal. It's not going to be corporate in the long run. And so I knew that, and I had an opportunity to write for like a major money publication. And I thought about it, and it's like, yeah, they'll pay some money, but essentially it's not my platform. And so I decided a few years ago to build my own platforms. So I was putting more time into Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And then I started posting on TikTok, mainly because my nephew showed it to me and they were 14 years old. And I started flipping in there, and all of a sudden I saw these people day trading and I got so mad because people were selling courses on day trading. And I knew there were young, impressionable people there watching this thinking, again, you can see where I'm going right back to what happened to me. And I'm like, I got to educate people. And so I'm super passionate about educating people on there and trying to find ways to make my research engaging and fun, and personal finance fun and all that. But that's what drew me on there. And then I think maybe like my 20th video, I got like 1 million views on it. And then I'm like, okay, so I've been humping on YouTube for 2 years, and I think my channel's got 300,000 views. And then I got one video in 1 week and I got 1 million views. And so essentially I was like, okay, so the eyes are there, the growth is there. So I've just been putting a lot of time into that. And then since then, TikTok has, I'm a partner with them. And so they're putting a lot of energy into creating educational content. So, but anyway, I got an avatar, and that avatar is a young working class. So this is the picture I have when I'm making videos. There's a kid on a bus, a public bus, and he's driving to work at Taco Bell. And he's in his Taco Bell uniform. And at the stop sign, another kid who's from the same high school, who's going to work at that same Taco Bell, is in his brand new F-150. And he's took out a loan. He got his parents to sign for it. He's spending all his money on this thing, and it's a status symbol. And I'm trying to make videos that make that kid on that public school bus or that public bus who's saving his money, I want to make him feel cool. And I want him to look over at that guy in the F-150 and go, what a douchebag. That's what I'm trying to do. So all my content is very much focused on trying to empower that kid, male or female, around number one, that they can become wealthy, because they absolutely can. And to do that, I just do simple, compound interest calculation around. And I do this, we can argue about the return I'm suggesting, but if you did the average return of the S&P 500 over the last 100 years, so $5 a day, 10% annual return, 42 years, it's $1 million. So my premise, and I've been teaching kids this forever, you can be a millionaire at $5 a day. And I would just suggest to all of these people watching my videos too, like you can come up with an extra $5 a day. So this is sort of the empowerment kind of stuff I'm pushing, because my other line of research has been on the psychology of wealth. And so I'll end with this. So I've done a bunch of studies now, and one of the biggest ones I did was with an editor at the New York Times, and we did a study on the psychology of wealth. And so I told you as a child, I was sort of obsessed with how did the same people coming from the same neighborhood, the same culture, how does one become wealthy and the other not? Like, what is that? Assuming that you've controlled for a lot of the institutional barriers and all of that, right? So people from every group, somebody gets there and somebody doesn't. And I'm really curious about what are the individual differences? Like what is the mindset? Is there a mindset, right? Is there a psychological difference? That's the first question I had. And so one of the studies we did, I loaded it up with stereotypes of rich people. Like you got to go to private school, rich people are all trust fund babies, et cetera. They don't want to pay their taxes. Believe it or not, I was looking for a tax aversion scale in the literature, and there isn't one, so I had to make one. But I'm just really curious, like, are these stereotypes true? Like, I don't know. And then the other thing I did is I loaded it full of psychological variables. And then the third thing we did is we asked about spending habits. And so I'll leave you with this. So has anyone read The Millionaire Next Door? Yeah, so essentially it's correct. So essentially I did the peer reviewed, validated study of The Millionaire Next Door, but I threw in a bunch of extra stuff. And so there totally is a mindset around wealth. One of the key indicators is something called locus of control, which in psychology, there's an internal or an external locus of control. Essentially, the location in which you attribute the outcomes in your life. So internal means my failures, my successes are because of my mindset, because of my mistakes. An external locus of control is all the outcomes in my life are because of external factors. It's the government, it's whatever. It's not me, it's everybody else, or it's somebody else. And by the way, you can always find somebody else to blame who's worthy of blame, right? On an individual level, it doesn't really help you much. And there's been hundreds of studies that have shown this. And so that's what we found in our study too. People who are ultra wealthy, 8 out of 10 were self-made, meaning that they were middle class where they started out. So I compared a group of people that had 11 million in net worth to a group of people that had $500,000 in net worth. And that was one of the differences we saw. We saw differences in money scripts, but I'll leave you with this. The thing that surprised me the most was, and this goes to The Millionaire Next Door, the ultra wealthy in our study had 18 times more money, but they only spent twice as much. And that's the thing that blew me away. Like, I did not know it was going to be that profound. So they spent, instead of like $300 on a watch, they spent $800. That's not a Rolex. Well, if it is, let me know which one and I'll go buy it for $800. They spent $40,000 on a car instead of $26,000. That's not a Lamborghini. And when you look on Instagram, you think anyone who has 11 million in net worth, that's what they're going to be driving, right? Of course. Not true at all. Same thing with a house, same thing with a vacation. Across the board, they were only spending twice as much. And so I kind of thought that was true because, I work with a lot of ultra wealthy people. I know that they're savers. I know that they're vigilant around their money. That's how they have kept their net worth, right? If you're not worried about saving it and concerned about that, you spend it. And so that's something we've seen in a lot of our studies. It's that vigilance really helps you when it comes to your net worth. So anyway, that's something else I do on social media is I try to find ways. So it's sitting in an academic journal that you haven't read, and there's probably only 100 people are going to read. And so what I do is try to take all that research and I try to like funnel it into the brains of Americans. And so to be honest, that's I'm pretty passionate about that. So I'm passionate about my teaching, my research, but that's kind of what's been driving me lately is helping people out. And so I've been doing that on social media, and I get lots of great feedback. Like my best comment, and I'll end on this, was somebody who said, I've been following you on TikTok for the last year and a half. Just want to let you know I got out of college. I got my first job, and I'm investing 30% of my income. And I was sorry, I just muted myself. So that's been something that's been a driving passion for me is like, how can I take what I've been learning and help as many people as possible? So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Looks like there's some in the chat here. Yep, I'm at Dr. Brad Klontz everywhere, including Clubhouse. Anyone on Clubhouse yet? It's an interesting place. Yeah, so media does take up a lot of time. I'm going to say that I probably do 2 podcasts a week. And I probably do about 6 media interviews a week on average. Does it, okay, so here's what's really interesting. Okay. So the short answer is no. Like if you do an interview in the New York Times, and by the way, I think I've had 3 features, where there's an entire page and there's a picture of me standing there. I don't think it really yields that much, to be honest. That's just the bottom line. And think about it, people are getting that New York Times every day. It's not like they'd be like, whoa, who's this handsome gentleman? Wow. I mean, it's just like they just get inundated with this stuff, right? So, however, you can take that article. So the question is this: you get in the media, it's just going to go nowhere. Like, unless you take it and then make something happen with it. And that's the opportunity. So if you can take your feature in the news and then use that to take your career to the next step, that's where it's super valuable. So it really comes down to what you're doing with it. The field of financial therapy. All right, so great. So here's the bottom line. I can't say a whole lot about it, but I want you to pay very close attention to what's going to happen with the field of financial planning in March, because financial psychology is going to become big. As a matter of fact, you all might be required to learn it if you wanted to become a CFP. That's all I'm saying. Maybe. I can't tell you. I don't know. But just keep your eyes open for it, because it's kind of, well, for me, it's exciting because it's my hobby, right? And I've been doing it for 20 years and it's fabulous. Like I could be, it's a coin flip on whether, I'd be talking to anyone right now. By the way, psychologists don't like me very much because psychology doesn't like money. Did I already mention that? I did a study on that. So I did a study on the beliefs of therapists around money. And of course they're money avoidant and they're in terrible financial health. So it's like, anyway, the field of psychology and therapy isn't really going to help people around money much. Financial planners are in a position to, I almost see it as like a mission. Like we're in a position to heal people, frankly, around the thing that stresses them out the most. So 8 out of 10 people, money's the biggest source of stress in their lives. Stress kills people. And there's been studies on financial stress in particular, and it's just as dangerous as heart disease and diabetes. And so, all right, so just follow this logic. It's the biggest stressor in people's lives. People die from that stress. Who's supposed to help them with the stress? Financial planners are. So I see it as a life-saving career, and I'm not overstating it. I feel super passionate about that. So I think financial therapy, financial psychology is going to be just sort of a standard thing that all financial planners are trained in soon. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, now I will say this too, and I love financial therapy, and I have a book with that title on it that I wrote, that I was one of the editors on and everything. I do think that the term financial therapy has some challenges, right? And the challenge with the word is that the financial service industry doesn't want anything to do with the word therapy. And think about it, right? It opens up liability. It's like, wait, I thought you were a therapist. No, I'm a financial planner. I mean, I love the concept in terms of the Journal of Financial Therapy, in terms of the intersection of therapy and finance and all this kind of stuff. I just feel like it has a challenge in terms of educating people. Like the primary education is, no, I'm not a therapist. I'm a financial therapist. I think it just has some challenges, right? I love the entire concept. I just think it's a branding issue that there's some difficulty with it. Hopefully that makes sense. I'd love to have you argue with me or discuss it. Behavioral science you recommend the most? Oh man, you just don't want to ask an author what books to recommend, do you? So let me think. Behavioral finance, science. Well, never mind. I'm not going to answer that question. Aspiring financial advisors apply your discoveries through our practices. Can you give a few examples? Okay, great. So one of the books I've written is called Facilitating Financial Health, and it's being used in a couple dozen universities right now. I don't know if it's more master's degrees or whatever, but I tried my best. That's on its second edition. And in that book, I talk about money scripts. But one of the things that I'm super excited about is I've taken what I think is the most effective conversational strategies in the field of psychology, and I've applied it to financial planning. And so essentially, it's learning how to help somebody motivate somebody in the direction of change without stopping the process. And I'll just give you a really quick example. And this is something that's pretty powerful. So in the field of psychology, what we've discovered is that if somebody's resisting change, so they know they should change, but they don't do it, which by the way is every financial planning client around something, right? It's like, hey, you were supposed to get a will or a trust and they didn't follow through on it. Or, hey, whatever, like people not following advice is like the number one complaint of financial planners. And so people are ambivalent, right? There's part of them wants to do them, part of it doesn't. And the field of psychology found that if somebody's ambivalent, so part of them wants to do it and part of it doesn't, they're not moving on it, and you're confrontational, you decrease the chances that that person's going to do it. Now, it really takes some time to really understand what I'm talking about, but you're actually hurting people by confronting them around a behavior they're not ready to change. And so in facilitating financial health, I give like 9 different tools on how to have an effective conversation with people, all based on research in psychology. Okay, so let me see here. If anyone wants to chime in too.
I did have something about that. So just like helping people, like I was listening to this podcast. I don't know if you heard like George Kinder's life planning courses and stuff. He talks a lot about that too. Like first, like, and I thought it was really interesting. First, what he'll do is he'll like help and talk through people like what they actually value in their life. And then they'll look at their spending or their actions, and then it can always go back to their value sheet. So he first establishes with them, like, what do they value? And then he goes to what they do and say, how does this align with your values? And then a lot of times they'll come to the conclusion themselves. They're like, oh, you're right. It doesn't align with my values. And then they can decide for themselves like, oh, I should probably change. If I really do value that, it's either I don't really value what I said I value, or I should change. So.
Yep, it's a fabulous discovery tool. I also find like conversationally, just by doing reflective listening, you can actually help people with that too. That's like probably the most powerful technique, which is like, you know, somebody says, you know, you give them their list of things they need to do, and like, hey, so how are you coming on that will or that estate plan or whatever? And they say, oh, well, I didn't do it. And as a helper, I want to say, but you remember, it's important to do it, right? And then what happens is they say, yeah, but these are reasons why I didn't. And I say, these are the reasons why you should. And then all the science shows that that person's less likely to do it because I did that confrontation. And so instead, what I'll do is I'll be like, oh, so this you didn't move forward on that. Yeah, that's right. And so essentially what happens though, you're holding up a mirror. So they're sitting there telling you they want to do it. And then you said, oh, so you decided not to do that. Well, I didn't decide not to do it. Oh, so tell me why you want to do it. I mean, essentially you get the person talking about why they want to change. And that's the most effective thing. And the best way to do that is to just hold a mirror up to somebody just by reflecting what they're saying. So there's 9 evidence-based techniques, but that's the most powerful one. I just shared it with you. How important is for my financial advisors to resolve their own money stories? I think it's really important. And so, you know, my latest book is Money Mammoth. You guys probably are just loaded up with books. If you go to my website, bradklontz.com, I've got a link to my YouTube videos. You could just watch a YouTube video on money scripts and learn about it that way. I also have all the studies I mentioned are on there, and you can just download them with a click of a button. So I just encourage you to check that out if you're interested in this stuff. And then my money scripts questionnaire too, which is on my RIA website. But you can go in there and take it for free, and it'll give you an analysis of your money scripts. So I think we have about 10 more minutes. If anyone has anything else they want to ask or talk about.
Yeah,
So
oh,
go ahead, Jimmy.
I had a question for you as well. So my work really revolves around 401k plans. And so I'm really interested in how you ran those education meetings to be so much more effective.
So first of all, there was 0 education. So just keep that in mind. And what we did instead is, you know, we did a bunch of things. So it's Mutual of Omaha. And I don't know if you guys know that company very much, but, you know, they used to have a show called Wild Kingdom. This is like a long, long time ago. And so they would have all these animals. And so people came in and they got to pick a stuffed animal. And, you know, we had some music in the background and some incense or whatever. And then what we did is we said, you know, essentially just talked about retirement. And if we have found that people are save most aggressively when they have a really clear vision of their retirement. So on your table, what you're going to find is a sticker book and a bunch of art supplies. And so, and by the way, imagine this group of truck drivers, and they're looking around. We almost canceled the experiment because we thought they were going to kill us. These tattooed, and next thing you know, it's a kindergarten classroom, and they're all sitting there with their little stickers, and they're making their ideal vision of retirement. And this is something that I didn't really anticipate, but it makes sense why it was so powerful. Then what we said, who would like to share, their ideal retirement? And what's so fascinating is, guess who did it? It's the older people. So people close to retirement. And so this one guy, and I'm picking on these gravel truck drivers because we like I said, we almost canceled the experiment watching these guys walk in. But there's this one guy, older, like grizzly, bearded, muscle bound, tattooed guy, probably in his like late 50s. And he's like, boom, I picked this cow because I don't know if you guys know this, but I bought a ranch up in Montana. And as soon as I retire, I'm going to have 20 head of cattle, and here's da 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 da. This is all that I want. And we got this, we got that. And hey, all you guys, you need to sign up for that 401k because, and so all of a sudden they're seeing this model of somebody who's getting exactly what they want. And I think that probably really, really helped because this person, there's a lot of social proof because this guy had some status in the group. And what you'll find a lot of times is, those people like to share too. Leaders will have a tendency to step up and share that kind of thing. And I think that had maybe even a bigger impact than anything, to be honest with you. It was like that modeling. And so that's what we found in the other study too, is we had people share, but essentially creating a powerful vision. I think that's the most important thing. So anything that will facilitate doing that. And so conversationally, like in a financial planning practice, I might not have crayons on my desk when you walk in because you'd be like, that's pretty weird. But I might ask you to sort of paint a picture of your ideal retirement, and just get really curious about that. So what helps me is to really have a vision of what my clients want. So yeah, you're talking about retirement and all that, but like, what do you see yourself doing? Where do you, here, and I pull out a pen and I'm like, where do you see yourself? Like, ideally, where would you like what kind of house, like who's there? Like, what would you picture yourself driving? And so what I'm doing is collecting information, but really I'm getting them to get a really clear picture. And a lot of times people haven't done that. They haven't really thought it through, right? And so I think that's what we have found, and that was sort of our hypothesis, is that is such an incredibly powerful activity because what you need to do is get people to be willing to delay gratification, to not spend it now. And if you have some amorphous savings account or amorphous retirement kind of thing, how does that motivate you? Where's the motivation there? I'm not feeling it. I want a bass boat. I can picture a bass boat because I'm gonna know exactly what I'm gonna do with it. And so that's the problem with the. So by the way, has anyone heard of like University of Chicago and all the behavioral finance people and everything over there? So essentially, that's sort of the problem with the behavioral finance type interventions. So for example, pretty powerful. I'm not sure if you've heard of the 401k opt-in versus opt-out, Jamie. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? So people save way more by making them select, no, I don't want to retire versus yes, I do want to retire, right? Status quo bias, et cetera. The problem is, and maybe you've seen this, Jamie, I'd be curious, is there's not a lot of follow through for a lot of people on that 401k because you never sold them on the idea why they needed it. You tricked them into getting it. But what happens sometimes, and we heard this from a lot of 401k plan administrators, is all of a sudden somebody gets a statement and it's like, whoa, there's $3,000 in there. Okay, I'm going to buy a bass boat because you never sold them on the whole vision of why they want to retire to begin with. And so for me anyway, that's where the individual psychology comes in. It can be so powerful.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Oh, so there's a question here on bad news. Who wants to tell people bad news? But as an advisor, that's a lot of times what you got to do, right? I want to retire when I'm 65, and you got to be like, you're not retiring when you're 65. And so, some of it's reframing retirement, but I mean, sometimes it's some bad news you got to give people. But I always like to give some solutions also along with that. It's like, well, I know you wanted to retire at 65, and I admire that goal. I'm just not sure we're going to be there with the quality of life that you really want, And so here are some other options. I got a lot of clients who work part-time or delay retirement. If you delayed retirement by 2 years, this is the scenario. And so, in financial planning, you call it scenario planning. So you want to push, come prepared with some other scenarios that can help get them closer where they want to be. You don't want to be the doctor who comes in and says, yeah, sorry, you got cancer. And then you walk out. Wait, is there a treatment plan? Try to give somebody some hope around how to do it.
Okay, I want to kind of open it up for any last questions. If anybody wants to unmute themselves or throw it in the chat real quick, we're getting close to our 8 o'clock and I don't want to take up too much of Brad's time. So unless anybody has any other questions, we'll probably start to wrap it up.
If I could ask one more question, that would be great. So the question is, it seems like for many financial advisors, their target market is people who already have money. So I've been interested in the way that your comments today have been focused on people that you're talking to who need to save more than they are and that have some sort of timeline for getting there. And so if in our businesses or with the firms that we're working with, we don't have resources to help those people or aren't designed to help those people, do you have any recommendations for how we could provide value to them, even if it's not through a relationship with us?
Yeah, so Stephen, I just want to say that that's a great question. And it's also something that's bothered me. So, as an owner of a RIA, fee-only RIA, like I don't make commissions, so like a $5,000, $10,000 account, if we went through our normal onboarding process, it would take 10 years to earn back the money on that from that just normal process in terms of fees and time and all that. And so it's a big problem. And so it leads to a huge disparity in who's getting help and who isn't. And I know when I first started in this field, I went to somebody and I said, a financial planner, I'm like, could I work with you, hire you? Yeah, I have a minimum of 200,000. Like, this is a literal thing that happened to me. And I said, okay, all right, I'm going to get there. So 5 years later, I went back to this guy and I said, okay, I'm at 200,000. He goes, oh, my minimum went up to 500. So that was my experience. And I'm like, I'm never going to be that person. And so my problem is I take everybody and then my partners get all mad at me. But more recently, we developed a robo solution. And so I pushed it really hard. I wanted it really hard. So we have our portfolios, but it's in a fully automated system and I love it. So the minimum is 5,000 and we don't make much on it. It's like 30 basis points, but I love it because I have a solution for everybody. And what I do is I've got a whole course on, I call it Financial Health Academy. And so I've taken like one of my master's level courses and I made it like for the average person around financial psychology kind of thing. And so everyone gets that for free if they're working in that. So they get like 50 hours of coaching if they want it. And I can do that 5,000 portfolio. And for me, Stephen, that's how I've taken care of that for me. So I can sleep at night and not make my partners all mad at me.
Yeah, I definitely see that huge issue of financial education for people who don't have money. So I appreciate that you're one of those people who's proactively gone out to create something, because that's something that inspires me, even if I wouldn't build a business around it. I'd love, as you just described, to have a tangential line of business that would give me an opportunity to provide some form of value to them and support them in their journeys also.
Yep, that's how I do it. So now it's really easy for me to talk to anybody because I'll talk to them for an hour. It's amazing how much financial planning you can do with somebody just talking to them for an hour too. And so I'll do that. And then based on that, I'll either, have them go through our normal process or send them to the robo solution.
Thank you.
So 50 hours of coaching. So it's essentially an online course. So it's a self-paced, watch videos, do exercises, got a manual, workbook kind of thing. And so that's something I did just because of the whole coaching thing too. Like, you don't have time to do that with a bunch of people. So.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. It's 8 o'clock, a little bit after, but thank you so much, Brad, for taking an hour of your time tonight. It was so appreciated. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone that was awesome. That was absolutely incredible. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me. It's an honor. So I appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming in. See ya.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
You.
Y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.